I seem to recall there was this recurring joke in the 1990s that every time you went to Radio Shack to just simply buy batteries, they would ask you what your phone number was. And everybody thought this was just so strange. And I remember it being like a joke on Seinfeld, and my dad was kind of constantly talking about it, and I was like, why does Radio Shack need my phone number every time I just want to buy batteries? And I don't know if you remember this, if you were around back then, if you went to Radio Shack a lot. I seem to recall that this was the joke. Go into this place, Radio Shack would have stores like in the mall, and they would sell, I guess they were there for like the electronics hobbyist, but if you just needed like replacement parts back when like you could actually buy things that you could fix yourself, electronics wise, computers and radios and things like that. And then I suppose in like the late 1980s, they got into the personal computer business, and were selling these like Tandy computers. I think like these TI-80s, TI-81s, things like that. That was my first computer that my family ever had. We went there to Radio Shack sometime in like maybe 1988 and got one of these things and brought it home. And the only thing I really ever remember doing on it is playing like Hangman, and they promoted all these other things you could do, like keep your own personal calendar, log recipes and things like that. And sometime in middle school, I actually wrote a novel on it. I wrote this big science fiction novel. It was like 300 pages long. I'm sure it's a masterpiece. But you could only write 3 pages at a time before you had to delete it all and start it all over again, start the document all over again. You had to print it out and things like that. And that's lost. I don't know. The last time I saw that novel was maybe about 15, 16 years ago, in my old bedroom closet at my parents' house. And I was asking my mom about it not too long ago, and she said apparently it's in storage. So I'll have to get my hands on that. I think it was called Moonglow. Moonglow is what it was called. Then years later, that hack Pulitzer Prize winning author Michael Chabon wrote a novel called Moonglow. I don't think it was about the same thing, like, a special liquid coming down from the moon that changed the forms into like an alien and like attacked Manhattan. I don't know. That would be funny if it was the same thing. Anyway, Radio Shack. So yeah, Radio Shack just kind of went into this identity crisis in the 1990s, and especially after that, like in the aughts, in 2010s, when it finally went out of business. I think the last time it was in a Radio Shack was like 2015. Just started selling phones. So, right. So now you can get like the phone from Radio Shack. They ask you what your phone number is, and you're like, I don't know. You tell me. Right? No, just joking. But yeah, that was a big joke. I seem to remember again in the 90s. I don't know. Maybe it's just me kind of editing my own past. Sometimes I just wonder about that because I was coming of age in the 1990s. So a lot of things that I remember may indeed just be things that people tell me happened back then. So I turned 18 in the year 2000. So I was very fully aware and conscious of what was going on. It was just through the eyes of a child, growing up and finding his way in the world, not necessarily what I am today, which is the 41-year-old Mike Booty. And this is the Midnight Citizen Show. I'm your host, Mike Booty. Sitting out here in the back of my apartment building, having some whiskey, and thinking about why was that such a joke that Radio Shack needed to collect your phone number. Well, it was just strange that by buying one simple thing, like anything at all in the store, it could have been a pack of batteries, it could have been a pack of gum. We thought it was odd that a company needed to know something private about us, right? Something that only our closest friends and families and confidants know. And obviously we could put that number in the phone book, right? But it's not like we're just giving that phone. We don't know what that company does with our phone number. I mean, if they want to know my phone number so bad, why don't they just look it up in the white pages? And so, yeah, it was very odd and felt kind of intrusive and everything. And yeah, flash forward, right? Like 25, 26, 27 years later. And that's like the barrier of entry to doing business with most companies, is that you have to give them this information about yourself in order to buy anything from them, in order to sign up for an account. It's like now most places that you shop, you have to have like an account with them. Right? You have to give them your email address and your phone number, and things like that. Not so much your social security number, but I don't know if we're I think maybe close to that, right? Yeah, it's just very weird world that we've kind of made an agreement to live in with these corporations. Yeah, it's just tonight. I was out driving and my wife called me, and she told me that she had placed an order to pick up some groceries at Target, but she couldn't make it out. So would I go and pick up the order for her? And I said, yeah, sure. It's a grocery store. I've been there lots of times. I can do that. And she said, okay, great. I'm sending you an invite to be my shopping buddy. I said, what the hell is a shopping buddy? And she said, like, well, on the Target app, which is another thing. It's like every company now has an app and you have to download it on your phone. A lot of times you forget that you have it. So every time you do business with that company, you're downloading an app that you already have and trying to remember what your password is. And it's just like, it's very fatiguing. And I've been having a lot of fatigue with this lately, just signing up with all these companies, and especially because I've been on the job market lately. And it's that kind of thing that's crept over into the job market now, where every time you fill out an application for like a company or like a university, which I am applying to like teach at universities and things like that, you have to fill out an account with the company that you're working for, the university. You can't just send in your resume or anything like that. Now you have to have like this permanent account with this place that you're applying for that you may or may not get hired for. It's like, how about like once you hire me, then I'll give you my account, then I'll make an account with you. That's fine. But now I have to get like, if you don't hire me, now I'm going to just be getting emails forevermore. And I know that I can unsubscribe to those emails, but it takes several steps and all that. You have to be in the certain kind of mood to do it. But anyway, I digress, which is something I never do in this show. It's digress. Yeah, like my wife said, you got to download the app and you got to go on. I sent you an email. You got to, you're my shopping buddy, but you got to have an account with Target. So I went on and I was like, oh, whatever. I love my wife. I'll sign up for Target. And so I went in there, and like, fortunately, autofill now. You just basically tap an empty field and it autofills everything. And accept a password. So I created the password, and it's like not strong enough. Oh my God. And so went in there, put in like a series of random, numbers and symbols, which I know I'm never going to remember. And then I just clicked a box that said, keep me signed in, and which completely kind of seems like it would defeat the point of creating an account in the first place. But I then hit the sign in button, and what's happening. This is like the moment of truth. Nothing happens. So hit sign in again. Nothing. Blank screen. Oh my God, now I got to refresh it. So I hit refresh. Brings up everything all over again. Everything is completely blank. Nothing has changed. So I have to go in now. I'm sitting in the middle of a parking lot right now. Just, the groceries are right there. I can see them. I can pick them up myself, but no, they don't trust me. They don't trust me. So, fill it out again. Strong password again. You cannot choose a password that you've already used. My God. Create another password. Okay. Numbers, symbols, never remember them. This is just the 21st century, right? Us just sitting in our cars, hitting buttons on a little device. And so I click sign in again. Nothing happens. Oh my God. Right? So I scroll up to the top of the page and it says there was a problem signing you in. Please come back later. It's like, how much later? What? Okay. Yeah. And I call my wife and she and I just we basically like reach an agreement that I cannot pick up the groceries tonight, even though I'm right there. And I say, is there anything you absolutely need tonight? Because at this point it's like 9 o'clock. It's just like, I guess not. Go back. We'll go back in the morning, get up early in the morning and go there then. And that's the plan. It was incredibly frustrating and stressed out. I mean, I asked my wife, is there any other way that I can prove to them that you are my wife and these are our groceries? And she says, no, you gotta be my shopping buddy. I just was like, I think I've got like a scanned copy of our marriage license. And she's like, no, that's not good enough for Target. So, right. It's just, oh man, the 21st century. Okay. Yeah. And you feel this, right? Like anytime that you're delivering food, you like work for the gig economy, like whenever you're out and about, you really do feel like you're just in this weird kind of sad dystopia. I don't know if it's really a dystopia. It's a sad place, right? When you're sitting in the middle of a parking lot and you look around and you suddenly realize there's a lot of other cars parked around me with people in them. And they're all looking at their phones and they're all waiting for like a job, like a gig, like to go pick up groceries, to go pick up food, to go pick up Amazon packages and take them to their doorsteps. And, right, this is just the state of the world these days. People trying to like sign in to apps to go pick up things. I don't know. It's just the way it is. All right. All right. It's the next morning here now. Overcast day in Birmingham, Alabama, about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm out delivering food. It's like now that grad school's back over, it's just kind of back to doing what I do, which is just try to scotch tape my income together every month through a series of gig economy jobs, delivering food, working for Amazon, tutoring. Got a lot of tutoring sessions lately. It's just because it's like the end of the year and I think parents are starting to panic about their kids' grades. So I've been getting a lot of tutoring business. It's always that way at the end of the year. Just back-to-back appointments. Which is good, but like this time next week, they're going to dry up because school's ending. So I may have a couple of students that I work with throughout the summer, but other than that, it's pretty dry. So I'm just trying to make money any way I can. You may remember last week on last week's show, I was talking about a new summer job I had working with kids on reading for this national company, and they fired me, so I'm not doing that anymore. But I think it's for the best. I have been thinking about it throughout the week, mostly over the weekend. They fired me a week ago today, last Friday, at the end of the day, I guess. So it's like that Office Space thing where we wait till Friday to fire people. We find and research that there's less chance of an incident. So I don't know how you could have an incident over Zoom, because all my training took place over Zoom last week. There was no in-person training. I was, on Zoom calls with people from all over the world, and my trainer was in Kentucky, so I don't know, which is, I guess, only a 6-hour drive away. Maybe he was afraid I'd get in my car and come up there and do something. No, why would, no, I would not. Not. No, it was it was more or less amicable, I suppose. I really wanted the job, to be honest with you. I was talking about it on last week's show, how all of my reservations about the about taking this job, working with kids on reading, which I'm not used to working with really little kids, and they wanted me to work with 4 and 5-year-olds primarily, and I have not worked with 4 or 5-year-olds in well over 15 years, ever since I was substitute teaching, before I even decided I wanted to go into education. But I was very nervous about that, and just didn't have any training in it, and I told them this throughout the interview. I said throughout the interview process, I said my experiences working with older kids. I'm certified to work with ages 6 through 12, or grades 6 through 12. And they said, "Oh yeah, sure. No, we understand that. It's just like the way that our enrollment works. You may have to work with younger kids." So I was like, okay. But then I found out when training started that it was really like that's all they wanted me to work with was younger kids. And I sent my trainer an email halfway through the first day of training, and I just asked him, like, do you know what my enrollment's going to look like? Because it's looking like and sounding like you guys want me to work with really young kids, which I said in the interview process I'm really not experienced in working with them. And my trainer just said, thanks for the question. Listen, you are definitely going to have to work with younger kids, but don't worry about it. In the next 3 weeks, we're going to train you how to do that. And so, I mean, you can maybe train somebody to take care of kids in 3 weeks at that age, but teaching them, like, on the level of learning how to read, phonics instruction and all that stuff, I don't know. I've worked with teachers in the past who have taught kindergarten and first grade, second grade. That's a very, very special skill set that takes kind of years to get into and to understand. But I nevertheless, I went on with it, and I have to be honest, like, I did take this job primarily for the money, because I am, and I'm not, I know a lot of people take jobs because of the money, but it's never really something that's worked out for me. I mean, I think case in point, because I'm in education, I don't think any teachers go into teaching for the money, but I did need some kind of income source to bridge the gap between finishing grad school a couple of weeks ago and no longer receiving a stipend from the university, and then teaching for the university, working as an adjunct instructor in the fall. That job begins in August. And so between then and now and then, I really have no steady source of income except for just whatever I'm doing in my car. And I was really looking forward to just the summer of not having to get in the car every day. Just down here in Alabama, it obviously gets very hot like even with air conditioning. It's very difficult to just be in the car all day long, driving all around town, spending a lot of money in gas, trying to constantly do the math in your head of like, am I making money right now doing this? And just what I call driving for dollars. Every time you get in the car, it's driving for dollars. Rather than making some kind of a salary or just getting paid per hour, whether you're, at the computer doing hard work or strenuous work or just not very much work, just kind of waiting there for the work to come in. It's not the right. It's just so every dollar that I make, I drive for. And I was looking forward to just a summer not having to do that, of having being able to work from home. And I know on the weekends I would have had to get in my car and like drive to an actual physical location to work with the students in person. And so, but other than that, I mean, everything was compensated, and it was fairly okay pay. It was fairly decent pay. I think I still would have had to supplement my income a little bit. But I was looking forward to just being able to work without having to get in the car. And so I kind of had that in mind as I went into this job. I got to be honest, I wasn't like fully, I guess, 100% committing to it. And I guess maybe that showed, but to the trainer, and that's probably one of the reasons why they let me go. But I don't know. I really did do my best in the week that they had trained me. It took them about a month and a half to hire me. The interview process was very long and very lengthy and very exhausting. It was a very serious interview process where I had to like write a series of essays, and then I had to interview. Like most companies now, they get you on a Zoom call, or like they ask you to they give you a prompt, and then you have to record your answer to that prompt in a video. And then if you make it past that round, you have a couple of actual in-person over Zoom interviews after that. Right? So by the time I finally got hired, it was almost like 3 weeks or so, and then it took another 2 weeks of onboarding me, of just filling out paperwork and them sending me stuff. Like I had to go, I think I told that story last week, I had to go get fingerprinted, which was a very extremely lengthy task of having to go to 4 different places before I finally was able to get somebody to fingerprint me. And and then they spent a lot of time and probably a lot of money just bringing me on before they could even train me. And then they worked with me for like a week, and then they just cut ties with me. They're like, no, we'll see. You're not really what we're looking for. Sorry. Okay. So, but I don't know. I did try really hard last week. I think the thing is that, I think I got naturally weeded out, of it because, I applied because I had found this job posting. My writing center director at the university had sent it to me. Said you might be interested in this for the summer. I know you're looking for summer work. And it was this company out of California, and I was immediately kind of skeptical of it because I have applied for these for-profit education companies before that work with students throughout the summer and throughout the school year for a fee from their parents, and usually pretty hefty fees. And I've been skeptical of them in the past. A couple of years ago, I went through an interview process with this for-profit school, academy in Nashville, Tennessee, that ended up offering me the job, and I turned it down for many reasons. One of them being that there's no way to live in Nashville, Tennessee on a teacher's salary. But primarily I didn't like the idea of this like scripted curriculum, which is what most for-profit schools do now, which is they give their teachers essentially they buy a curriculum from a company. A lot of schools do this. They buy curriculums for companies, obviously, but more so than anything else, what they do is they buy these curricula, and then they give them to the teachers, and the teachers essentially just have to read from the script. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. I don't like that idea because it sort of weeds out all of the training and all the I just feel like it's kind of disrespectful to not only the teachers but also to the kids. It's making it very robotic, the teaching process, and it is proving a point to the future that teaching does not have to be done by actual teachers, that it can be done with a robot or like a series of videos or even, yes, artificial intelligence. So, but that was my experience before a couple weeks ago coming on with these for-profit companies. And the reason I think they let me go is they just kept on saying, like, you're not really doing a good job modeling what we're giving you. And what that means is I'm not doing a good job reading from the script. So when I interviewed for this for-profit company a couple of years ago, they gave me, I had to role play. I had to model a sample lesson for a hypothetical classroom of kids. And they gave me the script, and they gave me a day to read over the script and make sure it made sense to me and internalize it, so that when I actually taught the hypothetical lesson, I wasn't just reading from the script. I was actually understanding how A led to B and then B led to C and C equaled D. I was given the chance to understand the internal logic and the mechanics of the lesson. With this job that I took that fired me last week, they didn't give me that chance. So like every Monday, every day I had to, beginning on Monday, I had to wake up and sign into their program, and they would give me a lesson to look at. And then I had to immediately go on to my own private Zoom call and record myself modeling that lesson so that they could then look over it and see how I did. And the schedule was such that I was not given any time whatsoever to actually look over the lesson before I got to model it. I essentially just had to turn my computer on and hit record and then just begin pretty much speaking what was on the page and doing it in such real time to where it looked like I had a chance to read over the lesson. And then after that, I had to get into a whole group call with everybody else that I was training with, as well as my trainer. And we would go in rounds throughout the week reading the lessons. So you might get 2 to 3 minutes to read a lesson before they had to move on to somebody else. They would give them feedback and on how they did reading the lesson. And it was just really a very counterintuitive way to train. It really was like you weren't given the opportunity to talk with anybody else who you were training with. The only person you interacted with was the trainer, even though there were like 20 other people in the Zoom call. And it was just unlike any other kind of education, training, professional development I had ever been involved in. It was just very impersonal, very clinical. Every piece of feedback that the trainer would give to people would be the same. He would be like, that's a very nice tempo. You have a lot of warmth to you. And it's like, that's not feedback that you give an educator. You can totally say like nice tempo, but that's the kind of feedback that you would give an actor. And yeah, sure enough, when everybody was given the chance to go around the room and introduce themselves, I found that I was the only one in there, aside from maybe 1 or 2 other people, who was actually trained in education and actually had classroom experience. Almost everybody else that they had hired had either worked as a summer camp counselor or a theater person, like an actor or a stage manager. And they just, and none of them were like as old as I am. Not that I'm very old, but most of them were either in college or just come out of college. They were 19, 20, 21 years old. And so it dawned on me throughout the week that what they're looking for, they're not looking for teachers. They're looking for actors. They're looking for people who could understand, like how to behave like a teacher and how to look like a teacher. But the scripts that they were reading didn't give them any kind of, they weren't giving them any chance to like internalize the logic of the scripts and understand, like be able to answer any questions that teachers or that parents and students may throw at them or anything like that. So it just was like I throughout the week began to grow just increasingly very uncomfortable with the whole thing. And I think that came through. I think that came across to my trainer. I have a very difficult time being non-transparent about how I feel about something. This may be one of the reasons why I'm just constantly having a difficult time finding like a steady job, something that I can really enjoy. Because I think like just part of longevity at any career is being able to just swallow your emotions and just go with it. And I've gotten much better at that over the years, but it's still something that I have to deal with. So even over a Zoom call, I think my trainer was able to tell that I just was not buying into this line that they were feeding us. So, all right. I'm pulling into the neighborhood right now where I've got to deliver this food from the Big Bad Breakfast. So, but yeah, like I just kept on modeling for the whole group, and my trainer kept on giving me this really superficial feedback and just saying like, you're not really you keep going off script a little bit. I mean, you're sticking to the script, but you're also making comments that aren't in the script. And I should say, by the way, they never really called it a script. They called them guidelines, but it's a script, right? Because every time I said anything that wasn't in the guidelines, they would ream me for it. There was one instance, for instance, where I had to mark up something on my Adobe, whatever it is, Adobe Reader, and I made a little comment to myself as if I was talking to the students, like, I think I really like red for this. Let's try red for this exercise. And my trainer said, why are you using the word, why are you telling everybody what color marker you're choosing? And I said to him, I don't know. I mean, kids just like to sometimes hear why you choose certain colors. I mean, colors are important to kids. And he said, yeah, don't do that. That's going to throw them off, and that's also not in the guidelines. And he kept on having this like sick fascination with like every other teacher after me that he would give feedback to. He would kind of constantly be referencing, it's like, good job, nice tempo, nice pace. You stuck to the guidelines. You didn't really comment about what marker color you were using. It's like, I felt like he just kind of had it in for me. And yeah, then at the end of the day, he just asked me into a private Zoom call. This is at the end of the day on Friday. And he asked me to come in and said, we're not really interested in continuing to work with you. So I said, okay, I understand. And so, yeah, I haven't been fired from a job since I was a freshman in college. And I was working at a coffee shop, and I was fired way back then. And obviously, it brought back a lot of feelings last week, getting fired from my job unceremoniously in a Zoom call. It made me feel like embarrassed, ashamed. And then I was just thinking about it over the weekend, and I think I would have been able to keep the job if I had cared about it enough. I came very close to being fired from my job about 10 years ago, and I remember doing a whole podcast about that and just being so enraged by it because I felt like I had done a really good job, worked really hard for this company for a very long time, and just to be unceremoniously fired from them. And I went in and I really fought for my job, and I got to keep it. Not only that, but I got a promotion because it just seemed like I was being fired by like a new manager who just didn't really know anything, and he was pretty much quickly after I got fired. He was fired. And I didn't mean to get him fired. It wasn't like me that got him fired. It was a lot of other decisions he had made, but that's old news. But I went in and I fought for my job, and like my boss's boss got involved in it and kind of did the math, and he's like, yeah. And I was able to make an argument and a case for myself very diplomatically and very calmly. And that's why I ended up keeping that job, because I cared so much about it. And this job, I think I would have been able to make a case for myself and be able to keep that job had I cared enough about it. I just didn't care about this job that I had last week. It was just kind of something that I was strictly doing just for money, just to survive throughout the summer, my wife and I. And at the end of the day, I just kind of didn't need the aggravation. And I was like, fine, I can go out this summer, and I'm teaching summer camp. That's money. I can find something. And that's something that always sort of happens, is that you can always go out and find something, like especially in 2024. There are ways to survive. And again, I just think at the end of the day, this was not something terrible that happened to me, losing my job at this company. I just found out very quickly, and thank God before I had to work with any students, and that this was not the kind of job that I thought it was going to be. That this was not a job for a teacher like myself. This was a job for an actor. It's like it's like, not to get, and I've never been too sanctimonious about being a teacher. I'm not one of these people that are like, oh, teachers are heroes, or anything like that. I think that teachers definitely serve a very important role in society. And I do really enjoy, being a teacher and being an educator. But I also know that I've been doing it long enough to know that there are certain ways that you train teachers, and there are certain ways that you prepare them for the job. And what they were doing last week was not it. You can't prepare a bunch of kids fresh out of college for teaching kids how to read. I don't think you can do that effectively. They were just giving us all this like phonics instruction that they had bought from some other company, and not giving us any chance to understand why we were teaching it a certain way that we were teaching it, not expecting any questions from kids or parents. It just wasn't conducive, I think, to the task. So, but I just feel like it's honestly probably just a badge of honor. Like, I dodged a very important bullet. And I was looking at some of the other reviews on like Glassdoor, that job review website, and a lot of people who had actually taught for the company who were saying, I'm never going to go back again. They were saying some stuff that was really shocking, and I should have read before I took the job. But again, I was just kind of blinded by the money a little bit. They were saying that the reason they want you to read from the script is that because there are parts of the script that require you to upsell the parents on future services. Because a lot of the times, like, parents are required to be in the Zoom sessions with the little kids that you're teaching. And because the parents are there, you're supposed to, as the teacher, actually sell the parents' future services. And that's another thing that teachers are not trained to do. They're not trained to sell things. That's, if I wanted to be a salesman, I would have gone into business. So, but yeah. So, and I will obviously say that I'm not completely non-complicit in getting fired. As I said last week, even though I did all the work for them and I tried to be very positive and optimistic about the company, I think it still showed to them that I just wasn't 100% certain or sure about what they were doing, and that showed to the trainer. But I also had to miss a couple of hours here and there because my dog, Izzy, my basset hound, Izzy, the week before that had gotten diagnosed with some pretty serious cancer. And so while I was in training last week, my wife was going back and forth to Auburn University, where they have an oncologist for dogs, I guess pets of all kinds. And she was going back and forth to Auburn, which is like a 5-hour round trip, and I had to take step away from training several times to take calls from her and take calls from the vet. And I think my trainer was very annoyed by that I was missing training, which I understand. I mean, they want me to train for their company, but they also but they're kind of annoyed that I'm stepping away. But I did tell my trainer, it's like my dog had cancer. My wife and I are kind of having to make some pretty major emotional and financial decisions right now. But I will catch up this weekend on everything that I'm missing. So I think that probably did weigh into their decision to let me go. So I'll talk about that later. All right, back to work. Okay, it's the evening now, several hours later, and sitting back outside behind the apartment building at this $20 Facebook Marketplace patio furniture I bought a few weeks ago to replace my stolen motorcycle. If you heard that whole saga a couple episodes back. Yeah, but I just got back about an hour or so ago from taking a round trip to Auburn University. My second round trip this week I took with my wife to go to the veterinary hospital down there. It's not an easy trip. It's all in all about a 5-hour there and back again. It's wild because if you have to take a pet through surgery, they just can't do that anywhere. You have to really find a dedicated place and somebody, a surgeon who will actually do it. And we brought Izzy home. I cannot believe that she made it through that surgery. They were not expecting her to. It was like a very, very high risk of death, that she would die on the operating table. And I really don't think that anybody else, any other surgeon would have done that. But this guy, this Dr. Matz down at Auburn, came highly recommended. Everybody we talked to just said, like, yeah, there's nothing that he's ever met that he won't cut. And that's how they said it. So it's very frank language, right? But yeah, it was just I've never had a pet who has had cancer before, and it's just wild because you do. This is one of the things that I guess dogs and cats help us with, right? When they die, they kind of help us gradually get used to the idea of death. Hopefully, before we have human beings close to us, pass away, and they're very good, I guess, training wheels for dealing with some very big decisions that we have to deal with in life. Of course, we can't really just say that we're going to put people down like we do cats and dogs. Right, that was, remember Terry Schiavo, what was that, like 20, 25 years ago? It was a big to do in the news. Like her family wanted to just put her to sleep, right? And yeah, euthanasia is just a very big thing when it comes to human beings, but when it comes to animals, it's one of those things that we just consider very naturally to do, rather than make. I guess it's just because animals are not equipped to deal with the kind of suffering that humans are equipped to deal with. Right? We have like brains, and we have capacities for logic, I suppose, and philosophy to get us through these things. And but yeah, with pets, it's like you really can't. They can't process these feelings that they're having. So we just kind of give them mercy to, as the saying goes, put them out of their misery, right? And so I've always wondered, because I've been a lifelong animal lover. I've always had cats. I've always had dogs. And I've just never been through this before, where you have to make these very difficult decisions that are very emotional and obviously have a significant dollar figure attached to them. I always wondered how I would do in this kind of situation if I would just make the decision to give my pet mercy, or just bite the bullet and really go for broke and trying to save her. And a few years ago, we did, my wife Jessica and I, we did have a cat Dobby, that we were absolutely sure was we were going to have to put to sleep, and then we just took him in, and he got diagnosed with diabetes, and we went out and got him insulin, and just kept him alive for the next 8 years, just giving him twice a day insulin shots. And that was one of those things that just kind of trained us that, like, to just the way that you just kind of deal with pets. I mean, you take the prognosis, and then you just figure out what you're capable of. And my wife and I just had this plan that with our pets, we just don't want to really leave any stone unturned with them. We want to make sure that they get the best care within reason, and at no point are we doing it for ourselves. We're not just keeping them alive for ourselves. We want to make sure that they're actually, if we're keeping them alive, the pets, that that they have a good quality of life, right? So we took her in about a month and a half ago, or I guess a little less than a month ago. I just looked at the doctor's report, like coming out of the post-op surgery report, that it was about it was April 14th. So yeah, roughly a month ago, that we took her in, and she had like a shortness of breath, and she was dry heaving, and it looked like she was struggling to breathe. And they put her under an X-ray, and later on an ultrasound, and it was just discovered what none of us, including the vet, was expecting, that she just had this very large mass growing inside of her. And that was the easy part, to discover the mass. What was really difficult after that was kind of just try and figure out what kind of mass it was, and they really still don't know that. That's the thing. It's like every time we take her in to a doctor, there's some questions that are answered, and then there are even more questions that we now have to answer. So, and I suppose this is what happens with people in cancer as well, right? But yeah, as it happens, though, it's pretty difficult to find a real dedicated oncologist, and not only that, but a surgeon wherever you are in America. And they recommended at our primary physician that we go to the university level, to like the teaching veterinary hospital. And that's pretty much the only place that we would be able to go to. So they recommended Auburn University. In our area, there's like Auburn, and then there's Mississippi State. And they're both about the same amount of length away. I think Mississippi State is a little bit further, but Auburn is 2.5 hours south of us. So This is the place where obviously just a big rival of my alma mater, the University of Alabama. I don't really care, but I did tell my wife if they fix Izzy up, if they get this cancer out of her, I will forever be a War Eagle fan, and I think I may have to accept that today. I told my dad, who's a big Alabama fan, and it's like, I guess that's okay. Right. So, and yeah, they did say down there that they have a lot of Crimson Tide fans. You know, the University of Alabama go down there and convert on the spot because these surgeons down there are really able to work miracles. And it's absolutely true. We took Izzy down there. Like, my wife had to take her down twice last week for a series of tests, just to determine if she could even survive surgery, because they put her under anesthesia and all that. And so she had to go down there twice last week, again, while I was training for this job that I eventually lost. And a lot of times, like, she would have to call me, and I would have to leave training. I would have to leave the Zoom call to talk to her and the surgeon, because it's just a very difficult thing, because like anything medical, you're constantly going back and forth between this very clinical explanation of what's going on, and also just weighing that against the very emotional thing that's going on inside you, where you're really trying to pay attention to everything they're saying, but it's just so emotional and it's just so hard to take. And it's like that in itself is just exhausting, right? Just trying to decipher this clinic speak, while at the same time just having this emotional war within yourself about like what's going on, right? And yeah, we just decided to have this surgery, my wife and I, and they quoted us a figure, and the kind of figure that's just an abstract number. I've never seen that number quoted outside of a car, you know, buying a car or anything like that. It was just, oh my God. And I guess just in a way it is just kind of this like absurd thing that you're spending so much money to take care of and cure, right, this dog that, I mean, ultimately has a very short lifespan anyway. I mean, basset hounds live to about 14, 15 years old, maybe 16. You know, Izzy's 9 years old, so she is, by all accounts, middle age, approaching senior dog status. And so we're spending all this money that we could very well still be paying off, right, by the time she passes away, if she does lead a long and healthy life. And it is at this point where you just say, why are we doing this? Why are we spending this amount of money to to solve this issue, to take care of this dog? And you just kind of think at the end of the day, like, and I was talking to somebody that I know who grew up on a farm and out in the middle of nowhere in, I think he said California. And he said, oh yeah, like growing up on a farm, I was very desensitized to it. But when it came to dogs, like, we had to do that ourselves. We couldn't take them to the vet and euthanize them. We had to go take them out back with a shotgun. It's like, oh my God. And he said, and it killed me every single time. It was the one thing that you never get desensitized to. It's just this, and I think that's what it is. It's just this animal that you allow into your house to sleep by your bed, to sleep on your bed. This animal that you trust, that just has this unconditional bond to you, right? And I think that's what it is. I mean, it's just, I had to do something, my wife and I had to do something that was so illogical, which was spend a vast amount of money at a time when I don't have a job, and we're just putting it all on credit, to save this dog that, when she eventually heals and gets back to capacity, cannot go out, cannot work, cannot pull in retirement benefits or anything like that. She just, like, they they told us at the doctor, it's like, listen, all she needs to do for the next few weeks is like sleep and just rest. And I said, okay, there's no problem there. It's like this surgery is not going to give her change in lifestyle at all. I mean, she's a basset hound. She literally just sits there and sleeps all day long while we spend money on her, keeping her alive. It's just a very absurd thing, but it's also something that we, it's just she's our dog. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And it's one of those things that's like makes you realize why you're in the relationships you're in. I think like the reason I married my wife is and the reason I kind of fell for her in the first place, not to get too sappy here, was she has a huge love for animals, and I think like she missed her calling by not being a vet, but I also think like she just could not take the emotional heartache of that job either, because she just loves animals so much and she hates to see them suffer and all that, and that's just kind of one of the things that vets have to deal with every day. But I think if it wasn't for Jessica, like Izzy would not be with us right now. I think like every day that Jessica would make that 5-hour one day back and forth to Auburn University, she would come back and stay up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, researching what the doctor had said to her, going over the reports and looking it up and just like being so that she could better be able to talk to the doctor. And it's one of those things that I can't do. I sometimes like it's one of the things I wish I could do, like take the doctor's word and just run with it. But I take the doctor's word at gospel, I think, because I just have such a difficult time wrapping my head around the bad news, if that makes any sense. So, but yeah, we took her down, and I mean, we took her down on Wednesday for surgery, dropped her off in the morning, and we said goodbye to her like it was honestly the last time we were going to say goodbye, see her. And we brought her sister. She has a twin sister, Zoe. They were born together, and we were forced to adopt both of them when we adopted. We just wanted one basset, but they said you got to take both of them. They're bonded. So we took both of them. So Zoe, her sister, her twin sister, went down with her and waited all day in the waiting room for us. And we were honestly just expecting a call. She went into surgery around 1 o'clock, actually maybe a little earlier, about noon, just waiting in that waiting room all day long. We were honestly expecting a call pretty quickly after she went under anesthesia that like, oh, she didn't make it. But an hour went by, and then 2 hours, then 3 hours, and we didn't get a call. And finally, around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was waiting in that lobby all day long with Zoe. And we finally got a call from the doctor, and he said that surgery was very difficult. And we found out today when we went and picked her up they discharged her today. So we had to go back down to Auburn and come back up. We found out that this mass was a lot bigger than they initially had anticipated, and it had grown onto her lungs, her heart. They had to remove lymph nodes, and they still don't know what it is yet. They're sampling it, so she's not out of the woods yet. But somehow they managed to cut this thing off. It was like a face hugger, an alien. It was just like on her. And they had to just cut around it and just very gently pull it off. And the doctor just sounded so incredibly exhausted when we talked to him. He just like, this was a very difficult surgery. She lost a lot of blood, and we had to give her a blood transfusion. It was honestly like that doctor in The Exorcist, when it's like, are you a religious person, Miss McNeil? Right? I mean, it just looked like he was like out of... He was just like stressed and exhausted. And again, it's a teaching hospital, so I mean, he said like we had to use all these staples that we never use, and it was a good teaching moment. That was the term that kept on getting thrown around by the vet, is that it's a good teaching moment, right? So, and I mean, yeah, at that point, yeah, this doctor, Dr. Matz, this surgeon just seemed to be fulfilling his reputation as being this guy who just could be like a miracle worker. Because again, we looked at that post-op doc today, and it just looked like there's no way in the world she could have survived the surgery. But he made it happen, right? And yeah, and I mean, everybody around us was skeptical. We would tell everybody about what we were doing, and they just like, I don't know about this. And it's like, no, this guy, I mean, he's like very highly recommended. He's one of the best dog surgeons in the world. And they're like, no, like my mother-in-law, like called my wife's cousin, who's like a vet, like like a world-renowned vet optometrist up in Wisconsin, and asked him to check check this Dr. Matz out. Right. This Jessica's cousin is a world-renowned vet, and I think he was going to be a marine biologist, but he got like bitten by a shark or something, so he just went into pet optometry instead or something like that. But no, yeah, like he called my mother-in-law back. It's like, yeah, no, this guy's great. Like, I'm up in Wisconsin, I know who he is. He's a great vet. So yeah, and just like after the surgery, I mean, again, it had been like 3.5 hours that Izzy was in surgery. We got this call from Dr. Matt saying, like, just we're going to keep her down here a couple of days for observation, see how she does. And then, like, it's a big open lobby, and there's a stairwell and a walkway above us where the operating room is. And right as soon as Dr. Matz gets off the phone with us, this door opens, and you just see this big team of doctors walking out of what I believe was Izzy's operating room. And you got like it's something like 7 or 8 doctors, right? And I assume students and residents and all that, followed by this guy who has like a camera with a lens about the size of my torso. So I think apparently like Izzy had like a thymoma, which apparently is very rare in dogs. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they agreed to go ahead with the surgery, because it was like just an opportunity. Every surgery that's done, every animal that's worked on at Auburn is treated, I suppose, as like a teaching exercise. It's just supposedly one of the best veterinary teaching hospitals in the country. So yeah, I just kept telling Jessica yesterday, like every time we would get worried, every time we would get nervous, that we were going to go home that day with just a box with Izzy in it, and just said, like, whatever happens today, we're getting her the best care in the world. So it's just like, it's like Dobby with that insulin years ago. We can't say that we didn't do everything that we could for him, right? And so she's home now, and I know I shouldn't have, but as soon as I got home, we made that trip home today. I went by the liquor store and I got myself some nice Bullet bourbon. Again, right now I really should not be buying things like liquor, and I also have a cigar here. Really should not be buying these things. They're quite expensive, and right now I shouldn't be eating anything outside of the like Dave Ramsey diet of beans and rice and beans. You ever watch that guy? People I know watch Dave Ramsey, that financial guru guy, sometimes for Schadenfreude. They like to call in and see these goobs who have gone into like hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt on stupid stuff. I said to Jessica, if we're not careful, we're going to be one of those people that call in. But I don't know. I don't think so just yet. But yeah. And Jessica ordered herself some food, and she said something that I feel very comfortable with. She said, tomorrow we'll wake up and start saving money. I like that a lot. That's good. Yeah, I was when we got home tonight, we got Izzy situated in her kennel, and her sister Zoe kind of came up to her, and we have to keep them separated because they have the tendency to work each other up. So we had to, and it's tough. So yeah, Zoe's sleeping outside of the kennel right next to her sister who's inside of it, and it's incredibly sweet, and makes you kind of completely forget about things like money just for a few minutes. But yeah, we put on, my wife and I, we put on an episode of the Larry Sanders Show, and something that we probably go all the way through the Larry Sanders Show about once a year. It's just become one of our favorite shows. It's this show that came on HBO in the 90s, about a late night talk show host played by Gary Shandling, and all the antics, all the backstage antics. And there was this episode that I was watching before I came out here, where Hank, his sidekick, smuggles in a bunch of Cuban cigars, and he's like a mule almost, kind of like this guy who smuggles in Cuban cigars for half of Hollywood. And he's like, send a box of these over to Elliot Gould, send a box of these over to Jason Priestley. That kid's a chimney. You know, all these like people who would have been somewhat relevant in the 1990s. And James Belushi, John Belushi's brother, comes in, and yeah, it's an episode where they have a Make-A-Wish kid, a kid with cancer who visits the set of the Larry Sanders Show. His one last wish, his dying wish, is to meet Larry Sanders. And so one of the employees is there and gives him one of Hank's cigars, and it ends up making him nauseous. It sends him to the emergency room. That's like watching that episode made me really want a cigar. It's just, they're all walking around smoking cigars on the Larry Sanders set. And yeah, like Rip Torn, who's so good on that show, he plays Artie, Larry's producer, is walking around smoking a cigar, and somebody asked him, this girl asked him, what does that do for you? She's meaning the cigar. She says, what does that cigar do for you? And he's like, it's a man thing, sweetheart. And I suppose that is. People will always ask me, what is this cigar doing for you? And I don't know what it is. I've never been one of these like man's men, whatever. Men's man. One of these like hunting types. But I do love cigars and whiskey. I don't know what it is. It's just you light one up and you pour a drink, and you just know what you're going to be doing for the next hour. And I think there's a certain security in that, a certain safety in that, and they just taste so freaking good. And should be consumed in moderation. I should take my own advice. Yeah. So it was almost watched on HBO the newest episode of the Jinx. It's like, I don't know if you've been watching this, but the Jinx is back. The Jinx Part 2. This is a show that came on. I had to remind myself when I watched the show. It was about 2016, I think, is when it came on. So that was kind of a while ago now, right? It's about 8 years ago. All these shows come on, and you just have no idea when you watch them, because there's so much content now that you could go for 3 years and feel like you just watched a show yesterday. And it just remember when everybody was watching that Tiger King show, right? I challenge you, the only reason I know when I watched that Tiger King show was because it was COVID. It was that big show that everybody watched at the very beginning of lockdown. They all locked themselves in their house and watched Tiger King, this documentary about Joe Exotic or whatever, who had his own private zoo, and I don't know, he shot the tigers. Yeah, so Uh, yeah, but I was watching this show, The Jinx Part 2, and this is about Robert Durst, this real estate tycoon. Or I guess he was the son of a real estate tycoon in New York in the 1980s who marries this woman and is suspected of her disappearance. And many years later, about 18 years later, there's two other murders that are also linked to this guy, Robert Durst. And the part one that came out in 2016 was actually done with his cooperation. Because this director, the director of the documentary, this guy named Andrew Jarecki, had made this narrative film about the whole case called All Good Things. And I remember watching this movie when it came out. It's All Good Things with Ryan Gosling and Kirsten Dunst. And the one reason why I watched this, I really had no idea, no interest, or really no knowledge at all of the Robert Durst case. But what did fascinate me, though, is that I think I watched it because it kind of filled in the holes or solved a mystery of something that I've been wondering about for many, many years. And it was the murder and disappearance, I guess the murder of this woman named Susan Berman. What had happened is that back in the maybe 2005 or so, around the time I got my first iPod, and I was listening to podcasts, I had stumbled on that NPR show, This American Life, and they were releasing all of their shows in podcast form, so you could get them on iTunes for free. And I remember listening to this episode that This American Life did about mafia, and one of the people they were interviewing or playing an interview with was Susan Berman. And Susan Berman was this woman that Robert Durst knew, and I didn't know any of this at the time. And this was not significant to This American Life's story at all, because the reason they were interviewing her was because she had been the daughter of this very famous mafia kingpin in Las Vegas, out of New York City in the 1960s. And she had written this book called Easy Street about her being like kind of this mafia heiress, right? And it was a very interesting story, all about how she worshipped her dad, even though he was like this stone cold killer. And at the end of that episode of This American Life that I was listening to in 2005, and I believe it was actually a rerun of a show they had done in the late 90s. At the end of this episode, they said that Susan Berman was found murdered in her apartment, shot in the head in 2000. So I was like, oh my God. Is this woman I had just been listening to for the last hour or so was found dead, assassinated? Like, obviously that was like a mafia hit job or something, right? Right. So that's what I just had assumed for about 5 years. Then in 2010, this movie All Good Things comes out, and it's like, no, she was most likely killed by this guy Robert Durst, right? This little shrill little turtle shell looking guy, this really rich guy who just has these odd mannerisms. And right at the end of the Jinx miniseries, he's like very famous for saying the words. Like, he goes to the bathroom at one point, excuses himself after they lay a piece of very incriminating evidence on him, and he forgets to turn his mic off, and you just hear him say, like, well, that's it, you're caught. I killed them all, of course. And I remember watching this back in 2016, and this little did I know became like a big catchphrase right after that. I killed them all, of course. It was just such a weird way of saying it. So they so yeah, I mean, what essentially happened, the movie posited the idea that Susan Berman and Robert Durst were best friends. And Susan Berman had kind of this sister-like attachment to Robert Durst. They had met because they were running in the same circles in New York and in Manhattan. And she just had this protectiveness over him. And I guess apparently he had told her a bunch of lies or kind of gotten her to believe that his wife was just not being kind to him or something. And he killed her and did away with her body. And she had created an alibi for him by essentially calling the medical school where his wife was a student and claimed to be his wife. I think her name's Kathy Durst. And said, I'm not going to be in today, I'm sick. And then they kind of made up this lie together, Susan and Robert, that she just vanished. She had disappeared, something like that. And she had a big cocaine problem and wasn't doing well in school and all that. So, and everything was fine. And then like 18 years later, apparently Robert Durst has this freak out moment where he realizes that Susan Berman is a loose end, is the only person in the world that can incriminate him in this murder. And so he has his landlord, I believe, go and kill her, shoot her in the head in California. And then after that, I think the story is allegedly, none of this is proved, that Robert Durst then killed the guy who killed her, Susan Berman, chopped up his body and threw it in Galveston Bay. I think that's how it goes. So, obviously it's a very crazy story. And so, yeah, part 2 kind of picks up on the heels of where part 1 left off, where part 1 comes out and it obviously exposes this incriminating evidence against Robert Durst that apparently on the night that the finale of the show aired back in 2016, Robert Durst picked up and ran. And he was arrested by the FBI in New Orleans and then taken toward a second trial. So yeah, I think I'm on episode 4 right now, and it's a fascinating story because one of the reasons that he keeps on getting away with this is because he just is constantly he's just a bottomless bank account. He kind of constantly keeps giving money to people to help him, to cover for him and all that. So, but yeah, I bet this filmmaker, this Andrew Jarecki, is so incredibly pleased by this whole story because his documentary essentially led to Robert Durst being brought to justice, and the entire documentary is showing the trial, and it's essentially like a referendum on the power of, I guess, watchdogs and documentary filmmaking to bring people to justice and to solve cases over a long period of time. It's kind of the same way that they caught the Golden State Killer, right? The authorities had essentially given up, and then the comedian Patton Oswalt's wife went out and wrote a book about it, and they caught him, right? Yeah. But I looked up this Andrew Jarecki guy. He had directed another documentary, which I haven't seen in years. Never want to see again. It's one of the most chilling things I've ever seen. But if you're interested, it's a fantastic documentary called Capturing the Freedmans. I didn't realize he directed that from the early 2000s. But before that, you know what this guy did? Andrew Jarecki, documentary filmmaker of the Jinx. He was one of the co-owners of MoviePhone. Right? We never had MoviePhone, at least if we had it down here in Birmingham, Alabama. I wasn't aware of it. Whenever you wanted to call and get the time of when a movie was playing, you just called the local theater and they had an answering machine that would tell you all the times. But yeah, MoviePhone was like a big idea. And it was eventually sold to AOL, and so I in the late 90s. So I assume just for the brand name. So this guy probably made like a fortune in the late 90s, right before the dot-com bubble like burst. Probably made all this money from AOL, and then AOL was then probably asking him for money. So And he was also a singer-songwriter. He co-wrote the theme to the television show Felicity. Remember that show with Kerry Russell? So this is an interesting guy. And now he's a documentary filmmaker of the Jinx. So, yeah. I didn't know any of this. Yeah. Anyway. All right. I'm about to wrap things up. I do want to do like a quick toast. Let me relight my cigar. And I want to do like a toast to a dead celebrity. Hang on. So I did want to mention that Roger Corman, the B horror movie king of the 20th century, has passed away. I believe he was 98 years old. He passed away last week at the age of 98. And this is, I suppose, a really big deal because Roger Corman is perhaps one of the most important directors in the history of cinema. He never really directed any movies that I think would be nominated for Academy Awards, whatever that is. But he mentored, I suppose, and gave a fresh start to a lot of the people who directed the movies that won Academy Awards. So people like Jonathan Demme, Silence of the Lambs, Ron Howard, Happy Days. Okay. Yeah, all these people he mentored, and of course the films he directed are big cult movies. You know, you got like The Little Shop of Horrors with Jack Nicholson. He directed all those acid trip movies of the 70s, like The Trip with Peter Fonda. Yeah, I suppose I've heard the guy was kind of I mean, he was an exploitation filmmaker, so it's not surprising that a lot of filmmakers came out over the years and saying that he exploited their careers, right? Like, but they always kind of take that with a bit of good humor. It's just like, yeah, I mean, Roger Corman, at the end of the day, he may have been a nice guy, but he was a businessman, and that's what he cared about at the end of the day. And I read some quote, some kind of story on somebody's Facebook this week that they had read this story that I think it was Peter Fonda who told it, who had, of course, worked with Roger Corman before he went off to make Easy Rider. And Peter Fonda said that Roger Corman really wanted him and Jack Nicholson to do this movie, The Trip. And, of course, they were big potheads and big, users of hallucinogenic drugs. And they told Roger Corman, okay, we'll do this movie on one condition. You got to come out to the desert with us and do acid. So Roger Corman, who is notoriously a straight-laced guy, goes out to the desert with Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda, and they drop acid. And Roger Corman is apparently like on his belly, face down into the sand for 8 hours, talking about how he's invented an entirely new way of distributing movies. And Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda ask him, what is that? And he says, well, I just simply allow people to look into my mind, and I project the movies that are playing there, and they can see them in my mind. And so this was his brilliant idea. It's interesting. Maybe some of you out there have done this hallucinogenic acid. I suppose what it does is it just kind of takes feelings that are inside of you, and it just amplifies them through like the lens and the filter of the subconscious. Very much like a dream. You're having like a waking dream, I suppose. So Roger Corman, of course, it would make sense that he's so obsessed with movies and how to get people to see them that he takes acid and comes up with an entirely new way of distributing movies. And I think it was Peter Fonda who said at some point he cracked up because Roger Corman said, Yeah, if people could just come into my mind and see the movies, it's going to save me a fortune in printing. I like that story. That's good. But yeah, Roger Corman, though. It's a really long interview with him by a film critic, Joe Bob Briggs. Came on Shudder, the streaming network, a couple months ago. I highly recommend you watching it. I think Joe Bob did a double feature of a couple of Corman's movies and interviewed Corman at the commercial breaks. So anyway, I'm drinking a toast. Roger Corman, here you are. Midnight Buddy. Okay, and that's all for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me here over the last couple of days. Keep Izzy in your thoughts. And if you want to help out the show, go to my Substack, mikesbonfire.substack.com. Great way to help out the show. I'm out of the studio recording a show this week, but next week I hope to be back in there. It's just, this has been kind of just a scrambling week of, my goal was to do shows every week, whatever that means. And in the past that I've been hampered by the fact that I always want to do studio shows. And what I'm going to do is I've got a recorder. So wherever I am, whatever mood I'm feeling, you will get a show every week. It just may be a little bit different. I may be in the studio or I may be outside like I am tonight. But I will be here throughout the summer. I'm really looking forward to it. And, you can also check me out over at OnSug, the Overnightscape Underground, ONSUG.com, and join the Facebook page. Watch me on YouTube. I'm not recording video for this show, but you can see a ton of other previous shows, like the last two shows have video, and you can see them there. And yeah, all of your major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. Okay. All right. I'll see you next time. Keep your eyes open.